everybody. Craig Sherwood here with you, and we have a brand new type of show for you, calling Coach's Corner. And with me is going to be our new co-host, is Bob Hart.
Great to be here, Craig. Always an adventure to see you.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's something I've talked to Coach Hart about this in the past, and I think he has some great perspectives on not just sports, but on life in general, which, incorporates into sports. And I think it's going to be something that is going to be pleasurable for people to hear about. And it's a different perspective. We're not going to sit here and talk about, who won the game last week and things. We're not going to do the obvious things. We're going to delve into the reasons things happen in sports and the personalities and the thought process that goes into those people in those situations. And I think in the long run, it's going to be something that's be interesting to people. What makes people tick? What makes that athlete special? So I appreciate being here.
Absolutely.
Let's give everybody a little background on who you are. How you got into sports. Because you were, and I remember you as a tadpole. As a young one back in the day,
yep.
And you were a multi-sport athlete, basketball, football, and baseball.
I think in those days everyone was.
Although you didn't play much baseball back then. It was mostly football and basketball.
For sure.
But you have a huge sports background, and then, of course, you got into coaching. So give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a typical Valley guy. Grew up in Van Nuys area. Eventually moved to Burbank my 7th grade, Luther Burbank. Actually played for Coach Sherwood in 8th grade.
Back in the olden days.
Back in the old days when we took horses to the game. But and that was actually my first organized experience was Coach Sherwood. So that was the first team actually that I played on. When I grew up, it was more rec ball or just pickup ball. Go to the park and rec and kind of live at the park. So went to John Burroughs High School after Luther, attended John Burroughs, went away for a while. Discovered found my wife and that whole.
Oh, that's the stay at Burroughs for some. So what sports did you play at Burroughs, and what coaches did you play for?
I played football and basketball. Never played baseball in high school, which is kind of ironic,
right?
Because I've been around it for quite some time. Played a lot of adult ball later on, but that's a different story.
You played for Bobby D back in the day, didn't you?
I did play for Bobby D, the legendary Bobby D. Football was quite the thing at Burroughs, so it was very attractive to people to get out there on Friday night and do your thing. So that drew me to it. Basketball was my big love. Played for Brian Hurst, the legend himself. Played for Rich Grimes, Lou Stone. I had the Merle Stone connection for football. So I played with some great guys, that taught me a lot of valuable lessons. Different era, but
Lou Stone, who actually became a firefighter, a captain, and was the president of Burbank Firefighters Association, was one heck of a basketball coach. I mean, he probably could have actually moved up levels, with his knowledge and his intensity, and he coached a good game. I mean, did you learn a lot from him?
I think the thing I took from Lou the most was competitiveness. He was a high energy guy. That played 200%, and anything less was not acceptable, whether he was playing or coaching. So he was somebody that really taught us how to play hard, what it meant to compete, which is a real nuance for athletes, I think.
Yeah, I think he brought a lot. If you look at all those, Coach Hurst was a very laid back, quiet type of guy.
Sure.
Coach Grimes, I little bit, on the edge. But I know Lou Stone was very animated.
Coach Hurst was a great XO guy, really good in game situations, ran a clean program. So he was somebody I admired too, because he didn't compromise his integrity to do well. So
and he didn't play favorites. He was fair to everybody. I mean, I didn't play sports at Burroughs, but he was my PE teacher. And I know, he would always be encouraging, and he'd be accessible, and and he'd talk to you just as though you were the star of the school. He didn't really matter to him, and I'm sure that's why his legacy is so important. And now they've named a gym after him there, which is fantastic. I'm glad when they name a gym after somebody who's still alive and gets to see the honor instead of somebody dies and all of a sudden, we're going to name this. Well, they'll never know that. They don't know that.
I think with most coaches, I think they miss the boat on what he brought to the table most was he was a good person. He was
Right.
just a good person. That's a great foundation for any coach because ultimately you're teaching kids how to, to develop character and to, to care about the next guy more than yourself and a lot of that stuff. And he was that guy. So
Right, and which we're going to get into as we go along here and talking about the character of sports, which is what this is kind of all about. So, on the other hand, I started out, I was not the athlete. I was the guy who was always just not good enough, but I love sports, and I got cut from the baseball team as a sophomore by Dave Jackson.
Yep.
Remember that day very well. And, but I loved the game. And then, so I started actually coaching baseball back in the Hat Minor days when I was a senior in high school, and we started a Hat Minor team, an 8th, 9th grade team at the time.
Yep.
And it was funny because I started my junior year doing it, and we had a great team. We won the league title back then. And the next year, go back to Burroughs my senior year, and here's a couple of my players going to Burroughs too.
That's
and it was
fun.
like, it was very like, well, this is, but it was great. Juan Luna was our pitcher. I don't know if you knew Juan Luna or not.
Very well. Yeah.
He was, he was on my very first ever team, and
Had the big
great
12-6 curveball. Yeah.
yes, he did.
Yeah.
And a big head of hair to go with it, and everything else.
Drove
So.
a Capri, I remember.
Yeah. But he was a great guy back then. So, that's where I got my start. And then, of course, went into Babe Ruth and everything else. And then finally got a coaching job back in, what was it, around 1980 in that area, 79, at Providence High School. And with Dave Galarno, the school's only been co-ed for like 3 or 4 years at that point. There's always an all-girls school. The minister brought boys in.
Uh-huh.
And coached there for a year with Dave Galarno. And then Mike Rousseff and myself actually went over to Bell Jeff and coached JV ball there for 2 years at Bell Jeff, like around 80, 81. And Hal Krug was the head coach. He was the head coach of football and baseball there. And then Hal, I remember my second year there, Hal Krug came up. He had us dressed for a varsity game. It was a night game over back at Northwest Park, now Foy. And he turned to me and says, go over and coach third base for me. And I went out to coach third base in a varsity game and Bell Jeff's Division 45 or something back,
Right.
But to me, I was scared to death. I was scared to death out there at the speed, everything else, of the game. But it was a rush.
Sure.
So right after that, the next year, I was still coaching, in the Park and Rec and Babe Ruth ball. And Carl Keller, who was head coach of Burroughs, his son was playing actually for Mike Rousseff. And Carl came up to me and said, I just love the way your kids play. I love how fundamentally they do things. I want you to come coach with me at Burroughs. And wow, okay. So I went and the first year I was his assistant coach on varsity, and he taught me a ton of stuff, movement, left glove side, everything was, very fundamental.
Very technical.
Because he came from Hart.
Yep.
Yeah,
you could tell fundamentally he was solid.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the second year I was the head JV coach. It was great, because I got my first taste of that.
How old were you?
I wouldn't say probably. Well, I was in my early 20s, easily. I mean, I wasn't very old at all at that time. And then what happened was they had a teacher strike in Burbank, and he got ruffled a lot of feathers, and he kind of got fired, and he was leaving. So he went to the banquet, that last banquet, and says, I'm leaving the program, and I'm turning the program over to Craig Sherwood.
Really?
Yeah, well, guess you can't do that. The administration has a few things to say about that. So, of course, I didn't get the job because I didn't have the experience or anything else, and I probably didn't deserve the job.
Who was the next coach?
I think it was Paul Haney, who came from Notre Dame. I'm not sure about that. But anyhow, when that happened, a friend of mine I knew had got the head coaching job at Crespi. And he came to me and said, hey, I'd like you to come in and be my assistant coach out of Crespi. And then all I knew about Crespi was, oh my God, look, it's, I've heard about the Crespi Notre Dame games and the battles and how great they were. And so, I went out there, and the guy's name was Mitch, who I can't remember his last name. I go out to coach with him, and it was a flying circus. He'd never coached before. He didn't know what he was doing. I showed the first day to our practice field, nervous as heck, because here I am. This is a brand new, I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm out of Burbank, and I'm at one of the top schools in the Valley. We get there for the first day of tryouts. He turns to me and says, okay, go run tryouts. Not the night before.
Into the fire.
Right
baby.
there at that moment, run the tryouts. And I'm thinking, oh my, wait a second. I have nothing. I don't know, but I figured it out, and on the fly.
Was Mucky there at that time?
Oh, no. He was still head coach at Valley College.
Gotcha.
And that's when the transitions were going through with jobs. So after that first year, of course, I actually went into the athletic director, who was named Paul Muff, about 3-4 into the season. And I said, Paul, I go, I got, you may fire me too, but I'll tell you right now, you have to get rid of this guy at the end of the year because he has no business being a head coach at a level like this. And I go, and he goes, we've heard the stories. I mean, a couple of quick stories that people might find funny is, number one, we're on a bus, we're on a losing streak. And we're on the bus one day, and he has every kid pick out a piece of paper with a number. He takes the numbers, he divides it by 8 or whatever it is, and then he had 10 lineups made up. And that's the lineup he used. The number was the...
Nice.
So that's how he came with lineups.
Scientific.
But the big catch was, one time when it was really going bad and the players wouldn't talk to him, Mitch Fair, that was his name, Mitch Fair. Instead, we needed a team meeting. So we go out in the middle of the outfield, and all of a sudden, he goes out and he brings out a boom box and he puts it down. I go, what's he going to play? Music while he talks? He's recorded his speech the night before, puts it down in the middle of the pile, turns the play button on, and walks away to have his speech play to the kids. And I'm doing, he goes, Coach, let's go. And I'm going, so I went with, loyalty's still loyalty.
Nice gimmick.
I found out later our center fielder, Pat Murphy, actually urinated on his player while it was playing.
Nice.
I mean, that's how, at the end of the year, he was fired, and they came to me and they said, we want you to stay on. And I was very, and they're talking about me having given me the head job then, but then the junior college thing fell all apart, and Muck, who was a coach at Valley College and just winning a state title, him and Dave Snow, and his job was to be the lifeguard there. And they eliminated all his jobs, so he had no job. So they called me and they said, "Look, we want to, we want you to stay, but we want you to, but we want to give this." I said, "Are you kidding? The man hugely. He just won a state title in college baseball, in JC baseball. Of course, he's,
Yep.
So he goes, yeah, but we want him to have you on his staff. We want him to talk to you." So a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call. He goes, Coach, I want you to come out and we talk. And I go, okay, the baseball program had an office at Crespi. Every program had their own office. Meet you in your office. Oh, no, in my office. Your office? His office was a third base dugout of Valley College.
Yeah.
Because that's where he, and he actually lived across the street from Valley. So I met him out there and we talked, and I became his assistant coach for a couple of years. And then I said, one day I want to be a head coach myself. Let me go down and coach JV for a couple of years, because you make decisions as as an assistant, and it's great. And
got to get your feet wet,
but you got to make those decisions sometimes, And so he did that, and after, off and on, it's been over 20 years with him, and every baseball thing I know is thanks to him. And he's up in heaven right now, looking down on us. And anyhow, so that's kind of my coaching journey.
Yeah.
What about you?
Mine is very short, actually. Just I started doing this at a very fatherly age with my son. So my first coaching job was in high school, much like yours. And then not until 10 years later, when I had my boy, that I started coaching travel ball and such. And then the Burbank High thing kind of fell in its, I was approached with that as a something that I knew from Bruce Osgood. He asked me if I'd be willing to coach the varsity. I told him that first year I'd rather coach the freshmen. So I did that, got my feet wet, and 20 years later, here we are. It's been a great ride for me. I
and let's talk. Look at this Burbank High. When you came into it, You were the flavor of the week back then because
Sure.
every year you were getting new coaches in there and
Yeah, I think they were 1 for 126 in league when I
yeah,
got there.
they were absolutely pathetic, except
Yeah.
for they had one player for a couple years named Freddie Sanchez,
Pretty good one.
who was
Yeah,
actually an MVP of the Foothill League and a last place team, which is kind of unheard of.
absolutely.
Frank DeSantis was his coach, the late Frank DeSantis.
He told me he had 3 coaches, so yeah.
When he was going into his junior year, that once again I am changing the coach, and they made Freddie Sanchez part of the team that evaluated coaches.
Really.
And from what I hear,
The panel?
how the story went is that when he came in to interview, and they're asking him all the questions, everything else they ask everybody else, he said, "Why do you want to be?" And he turned to Freddie and says, "Because I want to be able to coach great players like this right here, because he is the future." So right there, it's like the kid was like, "Oh,
That's funny.
So that's how he got his job basically." And then he was in poor health and moved on. But that was the story of Frank DeSantis back
That's
then.
funny. I kind of stumbled into it, to be honest with you. My background was much more football and basketball, but I discovered the love of baseball as I got older, the nuance of it, and then ultimately coaching kids is probably the foremost. It's not so much the sport; it's just being with them every day, and that whole interaction and some of that stuff.
Well, I've always said, we do this kind of 11 months of the year, and some of these kids will actually see us more than they will see their own families.
Absolutely.
So, but here's something, which I it's neat to bring, I don't know if neat is the word, but interesting to bring up is that, your son was a star athlete and he went to Burroughs while you were coaching at Burbank.
Sure.
And became a star pitcher who actually went on to pitch at Redlands.
Yep.
And you had to coach against him and coach big games against him too.
Sure.
And you were both very competitive teams at that time. So how did that, how was that at home, knowing a game was, the Burbank Burroughs game was coming up and all that? How did all that work out?
Wasn't much talk about it. We didn't go deep on it or anything. I always pulled for him to do well, except when he played us. And that's, that was just the competitive nature. It's just like a brother that you want to beat in wiffle ball. It's great when he does well, but against you don't want him to do well. So, and we had that banter going back and forth, but it was always good. He played another sport, so I was very supportive in that sport. I got to go to see all his basketball games. So we navigated it. I think people put more into it than it really was. Our relationship has always been built on dad and son, not baseball player and coach. So although I coached him at a young age, I never wanted that to be his identity or for our relationship to be predicated on that, that sports thing. So I didn't want to be the stereotypical sports dad. Because I kind of had that dad, and I knew that it wasn't really the route to go. I wanted and to this day, we have a magnificent relationship. And I think in part because I let him spread his wings a little bit and do his own thing on his own, under his own, his own tutelage or whatever. If he had any success and I was the coach, it would have been my fault, or I would have been shoehorning him, or the perception would have been that he didn't deserve it. And then the other side of that is that his relationships with his peers might be compromised because his dad's the coach. So I wanted him to go to a place where he could make his own way. If we played each other once or twice a year, not a big deal. I just hope we kicked his butt. That's
so. Would he have gone to Burroughs no matter what? Or you lived in the Burbank High area, so why? Did you guys talk about that? And
all the kids that he had gone to school with were going to Burroughs, the travel team, that whole thing. He wanted to play with his friends. He would have come to Burbank if I had pushed it, but I didn't see the need for that, and I would never do that. I wanted that to be his decision. He also had a relationship with basketball guys at Burroughs, so that played a part of it as well. The kids typically want to play where their friends are.
Yeah, and that's important. And I tell you, I'm sure it was a kind of a tough family decision to make at the time, but I don't know. I think a lot of fathers would have looked at it that way too. So I have to give you some credit for that. The fact that you kind of let him be his own man. And was there any times you ever said during the journey that I regret not playing up here or playing for you or anything else? Or
no, we got a little bit of kickback from some parents because he was successful. That if he had gone to our school, would other kids have come to the school, and would we have been better consequently? But at that time, we were very competitive, and we were doing well. So it wasn't one or the other. And I wanted that again to be his decision, what he felt comfortable doing. Yeah, it wasn't really as tough as people think. It sounds tough,
Right.
but
No, and that's why it's a
yeah,
great story to tell,
yeah,
because people don't understand that, and maybe parents need to understand that. Maybe sometimes you got to let the kid make a decision for himself too. And
absolutely.
because forcing it down his throat is in the long run, would that have been a good, healthy relationship for everybody?
He had already heard 7 years of my speeches and my my stuff. So when you start to see that there's not the same eye contact or the same, you can see that stuff early on where that someone would be better served playing under somebody else. I mean, and I felt that way. I felt like he'd be more successful.
Yeah, and he went and played very, very successful at Redlands.
He was very
He
successful.
was a top starting pitcher for them.
Yeah, he was an all-league guy. He was all Western region. Had a great time playing for Coach Laverty, who's now at Chapman. We've been fortunate enough to send some kids his way. Chapman's a great school, as is Redlands. I think people miss out on the SCIAC quite a bit. I think the perception is D1, but it's really about playing, going where you're comfortable, going where you're wanted. That type of stuff.
Yeah, and I think I think you're very right about that. I think everybody thinks, oh, D1, and they don't realize there's a lot of good. A lot of good JCs out there to get a start at.
Absolutely.
And look at NIAA schools and Division 2 and 3 school. Look at Freddie Sanchez.
Yep.
He didn't go to a D1. He went to Glendale College.
Bryce Harper.
NIAA school. Yeah, I mean, there are roads to the major leagues that don't involve, D1 schools, because sometimes you get lost, and like I've said so many times, if you're good and you can play, they're going to find you. You don't need these scouts. You don't need these baseball schools, these things you pay hundreds of dollars to.
I think a lot of people really take advantage of that mentality too, with the way they go about their business rather than coaching. Where it's not so much about it's more of the feather in the cap they're looking for, or the ego of hey, I got a Division I guy or whatever. We look for our guys to graduate. That's first things first, and then to get them to college to play at any level.
And I don't think these organizations really care about the student, the athlete, the person. I think it's more of I still get emails. Hi, I'm so and so, and I was in professional baseball for 15 years, and now we're doing franchises. We want you to join.
Sure.
I'm getting all these. It's like, how do we make money off kids and families? And that's, I'll tell you a quick story that my third year at Crespi, we had a player. Third year, Brody Van Wagenen, who was made varsity as a freshman, is our second baseman. Good second baseman. Went on to Stanford. But he was struggling at second base at times. So his father asked, would I go out and work with him and hit him ground balls? I go, be glad to. So afterwards, I spent about an hour with him. And the family had good resources. And he walked up and he gave me $100. I was very grateful, because I wasn't making a whole lot of money. $100 is $100.
Sure.
But that's always bothered me. It bothered me right about a day later. I said, I'm his high school coach. Why am I taking money to do my job that I'm already paid to do?
Mm-hmm.
That never again have I taken $1 from a player to go coach him privately.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take money to do a summer team or a winter team or whatever it is, but a team. But I've never taken money from a player. I just felt dirty. It felt like I was doing it for the whole wrong reason, and that's not why I'm a coach.
Yeah, and you don't want certain kids to have access and certain kids don't, because certain people have money and certain people don't.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of want to be a level playing field, I think.
And funny story is Brody Van Wagenen actually became the general manager of the New York Mets.
Wow.
And
yeah.
And then he got fired after every general manager of the Mets seems to get fired.
It's funny how those things work out. Do you remember Alex Tarandek?
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was probably at the bottom of the bench guy.
But one of the smartest statistical guys you've ever met. Super
smart, great teammate, all in for the team. He ends up being a scout for the Orioles at a decent level. So you just never know. You never know.
Have you had any contact with him lately?
I have. His family generously donates to our program each year. We have a few people that do that. The old football coach at Burbank High, Greg Sobiak, every year reaches out and pays for a player or two to play who might not otherwise have the money. No one would ever not play because of money, but it's nice when people reach out and recognize how hard our guys work and the give back that they give. We do a lot of stuff off the field, so it's nice to see them rewarded for that.
Absolutely. Let's talk real fast about that too. I know we're probably going a little longer than we wanted to go tonight, but I think I'd like people to understand, especially who you are. I think they see me on the other shows and everything else, and kind of are full of me talking as it is. Many times I've seen you at Veterans Day with the team, and different community events. In fact, you just did something recently. Well, was it Union or something with the team, or
we did? We've done a couple of those.
So explain what why, because you don't see a lot of high school teams doing that anymore. That's more of an old school thing.
Yeah.
What's your thought process there, and why do you think that's important to you?
I'm the old coach, so I do old-fashioned stuff like that. But I think it's just because I feel as though the kids need to understand how fortunate they are to be out there. I think it's part of honoring the game is what you do off the field. So we try to provide them mechanisms, ways that they can contribute back without receiving anything in return. Rather than it's a fundraiser for us, we just do it because it's the right thing to do. We do Operation Gratitude. We have an event coming up in a week at Harvard Westlake for veterans with disabilities. It's a sports camp. And there's no return for that other than the ultimate return, which is giving without receiving. So I just think it's a good community message. I think it's good for our kids. I think it provides team unity. It gives us a chance to build as a group outside of what we do. Our boosters are fantastic. They organize a lot of this stuff. I spearhead it in the sense that I talk about it, but they go out and do it, implement. Great ideas are great, but implementation is even better. That same booster club feeds our guys every week or so, team barbecues, stuff like that. So, the community approach it can't be measured enough. If people are involved, invested, without corruption, it's a great fit. If you can make it so that it's beneficial for the group, but your integrity is not compromised by it when it comes to lineups, when it comes to playing time, access, any of those things, then I think I feel good about what we do. Ultimately, you don't make a lot of money, so
it makes me feel guilty because we never did those kind of things. I mean, funny, the only thing I really did that was kind of called cross culture was every year we would play a team from like South Korea or something,
right?
And we made a big thing about making sure we got all those kids a tchotchke type thing,
Right.
give them. But to watch, it was very interesting to watch the international game. 2 languages, 1 game of baseball, 1 language of baseball.
Yep.
And if their player were ever to, we call dose or hit another player, with a pitch, their pitcher would come off the mound and take off his cap and bow to the hitter as he walked to first base.
Yep.
As an apology thing. And can you imagine an American player ever doing something like that? Acknowledging it. And I think you saw a little of this when Japan played the U.S. in the World Baseball thing, and you saw that how the Japanese players kind of responded to things, and there's always, yes, it's a game, we're playing for our life, but there's also a sense of civility there,
and honor,
and respect. And sometimes I think American teams could use a little more of that at times.
Yeah, a little humble pie would go a long way for a lot of guys. A great coach was Dave Johnson back in the day.
Dave Johnson,
yeah, solid coach. And he used to say,
the guy who cut me, by the way, remember?
Yeah, there's two kinds of coaches or players. The humble ones and the ones that will soon be humble. And there's a lot of truth to that. For sure. I learned. I've been fortunate. I've had so many great assistant coaches, you being one of them, that I picked and prodded, whether it be formats or, practices, how to set things up, game nuances. I mean, if you can steal from smart people, you're generally going to be a better coach.
Everything I did, I always called myself the Crespi of the East, because of muck. It wasn't not much Crespi, but the muck system of the East, because I always thought that, and I had no problem saying it because that's the man who taught me everything I knew. And
I'm sure he got a lot of stuff from Dave Snow and so on.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
that's how it goes, right?
Yeah. Talk to me a little about, because I'm a big believer that playing on a team, it's not so much the wins and losses, but it's what a team sport, does for an individual as far as life lessons goes. And I think you agree a lot with that.
I do. I feel like those relationships are with the things that really last. I know for myself, if I think back to specific scores, I don't remember, but I could tell you every guy I played with at John Burroughs or wherever. So I think it's about those relationships. I think it's the relationships, the culture. I focus really hard on the culture, getting something that's positive, that the kids look forward to, that enjoy practices. I want it to be an enjoyable ride because I know that ultimately there's not that many, CIF champions. There's 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. That doesn't mean everyone else is a loser. If you're providing a great experience, you build team camaraderie, all that corny stuff that I actually believe in. I feel like that matters, and I think it's lasting. And that's really what I strive for, I think, above and beyond. I also feel I'm very competitive. I want to win every game, but I feel like that's the foundation to winning. I think it's like a garden. If you don't have good, irrigation, it's all great. If you don't have good soil, that's all great. But, so I feel like that's the soil for us is culture.
I think, and you and I have spent many, many hours together talking and discussing things. And when I first came to work with you, a lot of people don't know you used to be a juvenile probation officer, correct?
I worked with troubled kids, yeah,
Right.
and juvenile probation kids, yeah.
And which is in itself got to be a very tough thing to do because sometimes they're wired differently. But I remember when kids came in, you could read a kid right away and say, he's lying, he's deceiving, and I would think, really? I didn't. And then 3 months later, 2 months later, it would always, that kid was, but you could read that right away. Did that come from that job, or is that, and was there a mistrust sometimes of kids no matter what they would say, or how did you get that read on kids?
I couldn't even speak to that. I don't know.
Instinct.
I go with my instinct. Yeah, it's a gut thing. It's not a, and consequently, I don't put myself in a box and, sell my soul to that I'm right.
No.
But I let it play itself out, and more often than not, I was correct. But I think it's just gut level. I don't think there's a lot of, magic to it per se.
It's like an experience or something.
It really is. Yeah, it's body language. It's
right.
how the conviction in someone's voice, conviction in someone's eyes. Some of that stuff's a tell.
You taught me the word affect.
Affect.
Yeah. And what that means, and I used it for many times. Since then, and taking those looks. But I think, and you're the same kind of coach I am, that because you're with these kids, 3 hours a day, 6 days, a long time, and things come up and everything else. And I think you were the same way. We were the same way about honesty. That no matter what happens, don't lie.
Yep.
We'll take anything else from you,
Absolutely.
but don't lie. If we catch you in a lie,
if you called me fat, just tell me you called me fat. I'm okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But don't say you didn't.
And trust me, they called me fat.
And I'm sure they do for me too. And I'm okay with that. Just be honest. That's all.
Right. And but I just think that that has a lot to do with the moral character of a kid. And I was always honest with the kids.
I think once you set that expectation, that it becomes the norm. It's not a new thing. It's the norm. It's just what's expected. And, you have a place that you can start from with almost anything.
Yeah. I know that one of the things we used to always do is I wouldn't let, and once again, I got from Coach Mucky, was he never let a player the mother or father could not ever call and say, so-and-so, he's sick today, he can't come. It had to always be the player
always
who made the text, the call, or whatever it was.
There was no text in those days.
There was no text in those days, but because he wanted to teach responsibility to the kid himself.
We do the same thing. Yeah, it's really, we don't want, we want them to take accountability. I asked the boys actually on Sunday night to check their schedule, check with their folks. You have a dentist appointment on Thursday, let me know on Sunday night. Because we're building practice plans. We can't just willy-nilly it. So, but it's part of the responsibility thing. I think it's important for them, I don't know that they, I don't know that all of them have those expectations at home in terms of, keeping a tidy room or whatever.
And don't understand why.
Right. So, sometimes I battle that, but such as it be, that's the way of the world, I guess.
Yeah, and I just think, but once again, those are part of the core values that I think being on a team and being a responsible member of a team, instills in a player,
Yep.
And these are things that are lifelong lessons, and sometimes you're disappointed and everything else, but you get, there's a confidence you also achieve,
For sure.
Yeah, you ask the girl out and she says no. Well, your life's not over.
Right.
You can bounce back, or you go for a job interview.
Right.
And you get it or you don't get it, but you're used to the tenacity of the situation.
I like the structure of it too. Once things are structured in that way, you can do a lot more coaching and a lot less housekeeping and babysitting. So I think just from a foundational point, again, structurally, it's just nice to have things in order. People have responsibilities. Because unlike most sports, they're responsible for jobs, the cleanup of the field. The infrastructure becomes a job in itself. So
yeah, we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
What if the football team had to go clean the stands after a game, or put away all the things on the field and everything else? The way a baseball team has to go out and drag their infield, fix their mound, water the infield, and the pregame stuff too. You have to do and everything else. And
we get there 2 hours before the game, and we're there an hour and a half, 2 hours after.
I'm looking at the girls at Burroughs now have got a portable fence.
Yeah.
But now they have to get out there an extra hour early,
right,
and construct a fence around their field.
Right.
And I don't ever see other sports having to go out and do those types. It's just all done for them, you know.
Yeah. No, I know.
So it's and they're saying, well, why do we have to do this? But you know what? Sometimes it's that part of that character they're building. So,
yeah, I mean, that's how you have to present to the guys too. It's that we're responsible for the infrastructure and that everyone's got a job, and that's part of being a team. Simple.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we have. I think hopefully our listeners or possibly our viewers on YouTube are seeing what we're kind of about and who we are. And this show is more about, we're going to bring guests on and we're going to talk about the intricacies. We're not going to talk about, oh, how are you so good, or why are you so smart? We're going to find out, what went into your thought process to come to that conclusion, or what was how did that instinct? Yes, it's instinct, but there's more than just instinct. So I think these are some of the questions that we're going to ask people and talk to people, and we'll have varying guests on and different sports. We're both just because I'm a baseball guy and you're right now a baseball guy. We're both sports guys.
Yes, I love the big three as much as anybody.
Absolutely, So we all, we both do. We love our football, our basketball, our baseball. I love my auto racing too, my F1.
Yeah, and I love air hockey, so it's a perfect match.
Yeah, it's funny. When they were closing Pickwick down, Ross Benson, our cohort here. I guess he played air hockey there all the time, and he wanted to get that air hockey table funny. So badly. He said, I want to sell that to me.
Put a bid in.
So I don't know if they're doing an auction there, or what they had to do when they closed that place. I know they sold the pins.
Did they?
Yeah, individually.
Yeah.
So
that's funny.
But it's just the way it is.
Yep.
So that's kind of what the show's gonna be about. I think if anybody has an idea for a guest or or thing we'd like to hear us talk about, send in your questions to questions at MyBurbank Talks, and we're calling the Coach's Corner, and we'll be glad to work that in and talk to people about it. But I think all sports are on the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because we don't have a personal knowledge of sports doesn't mean we can't learn. And still, I think while sports is universal, or sport a specific structure, the thought process is universal. Every athlete has to, I never was an individual sports guy.
Commitment, dedication.
Right. I could never do cross country.
Right.
Because I was not the slim trim guy.
Right.
I always thought I was, but no. But there's a tough mental character to be a cross country runner. You're by yourself, and you've got to coach yourself. There's not a coach in the background always talking because you're on your own. I'd love to have a cross-country guy in here or a coach in here.
I would too, because I never understood how they were
Right.
able to do what they do. They're amazing.
So there's a lot of different sports and a lot of different disciplines that we can find out and talk about. So
Absolutely. Enjoy my time with you.
yeah. So we appreciate you coming in tonight, and we'll have sporadically we'll put shows out and see how they stick.
Sounds good.
Okay, everybody. This is Craig Sherwood for Bob Hart, and thank you very much for listening. And we will talk to you next time.
My Burbank Talks would like to thank all of my Burbank's advertisers for their continued
And then what
support.
do you do?
Burbank Water and Power, Cusimano Real Estate Group, UME Credit Union, the Burbank Chamber of Commerce, Gain Credit Union, Providence St. Joseph Medical Center, Community Chevrolet, Media City Credit Union, UCLA Health, Tequila's Cantina and Grill, UPS Store on 3rd Street, and Hill Street Cafe.